It's Evacuation Day, November 25, the day New Yorkers celebrate the evacuation parade of all British sympathizers, loyalists, and troops who had been occupying New York City the duration of the American Revolution. The Hercules Mulligan Society. And this is Bowling Green. On July 9, 1776, a statue of King George was torn down out of there and crowns on these fence posts, 90 of them, were cut off. See, the statue was made of gold. I'm sorry, of lead. And the fence posts were also made of lead. Besides, crowns were a hated symbol of the British. The whole problem was that after the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, the British imposed taxes on the colonists. Merchants had to pay double for everything.
Is he? Okay. Who gets to pull it down?
John Van Arsdale, like always.
Aren't one of you guys going to play John Van Arsdale?
Okay, so all these are between the trees.
The 7 years of occupation, to be replaced by Washington and the American troops and the New York militia. It's the day that I call the realization of Independence Day. Not just the declaration, but the declaration is a piece of paper and a lot of words. The realization of independence was when the United States was first actually free and unoccupied by a foreign force. That's what we celebrate today, is the day when the British flag came down and the American flag went up. We're privileged today to have a number of organizations who are supporting us. I'd like to have them say a few words. First, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Jim Kaplan, who started these proceedings 10 years ago, founder of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association. Jim?
Evacuation Day was a day of triumph. It represented the triumph of the American Army over the British in the final act of the Revolutionary War. George Washington was supposed to march down Broadway and hopefully would raise the flag here at Bowling Green, and they would take down the British flag. But the British had greased the pole, so they couldn't get up. So that was and that almost destroyed the ceremony, but a young sailor named John Van Arsdale bought some cleats and shimmied up the pole, tore down the British flag, and put up the American flag. Wow. But the great thing was that for 130 years thereafter, we would celebrate in this place Evacuation Day as a day of triumph. And Mr. Van Arsdale, who was 28 at the time, would have the honor of raising the flag until 1838 when he was 80. And thereafter, his son David would raise the flag for another 50 years. So this was a very important holiday, similar to July 4th. But it became a day of triumph, not so much a triumph over the British, because the British are now our friends. The British helped to build Wall Street and to build this country with the capital from the London. But it was really the triumph of democratic government. George Washington they gave 13 toasts at the Fraunces Tavern right after the ceremony, and he said, "Let the remembrance of this day be a lesson to princes." Now they didn't know what the world was going to be like. It was ruled by kings, but for 130 years thereafter, as we became stronger and the aristocracies of Europe fell, this was the symbol of democratic government throughout this city. It was discontinued in 1916 erroneously in the belief that it was anti-British, but we revived it at the Fraunces Tavern Museum with our Evacuation and dinner and 10 years ago. So, what better day to celebrate the triumph of democracy, the triumph of our alliance between the British and the Americans in fighting for democracy around the world, than right here on this day where it began 240 years ago. Thank you.
I have a friend named Evacuation, which is here, and of course, as he said, this is where it began. The Stamp Act riots took place in front of Fort George, which is where the Customs House is now. That was 1765. The statue of King George came down on July 9th of 1776 after the Declaration of Independence was read, and the American flag went up right here at Bowling Green Evacuation Day Plaza. We don't have the mayor here today, but we have the next best thing. We have Pauline Toole, the commissioner of New York City Archives.
Hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this really important commemoration. I'm just going to make a few brief remarks. In November 1776, General George Washington and his troops retreated from Manhattan northward to Westchester County, across the river to New Jersey and other parts. November, 7 years later, in 1783, he came back, the British left, and that's what we're celebrating today. Although, interestingly enough, the British were in Staten Island until December 5th, and then they evacuated that island as well. So although the Revolutionary War battles ended in 1782, negotiations for the terms of ending the war were not completed until September 1783. And then that's when John Adams signed the peace treaty in Paris. But then it took 2 months for the British to evacuate nearly 29,000 loyalist troops, residents, and black loyalists from Manhattan. Commander-in-Chief George Washington and his troops then marched down to Bowling Green, as you have heard, and the American flag was raised. That evening, Governor Clinton, George Washington, and friends gathered at Fraunces Tavern to celebrate. In the course of the event, 13 toasts were offered to the military, the war dead, supporting nations. The group also toasted to a hope that I believe is relevant today. May America be an asylum to the persecuted of the earth. With that, America and New York in particular has fulfilled that aspiration. Thank you very much.
In preparation for this event, I was informed that American students are also interested in history. So Jason McDonald of Christ Church School reached out to me. One of his prize students, Clementine McCoy, would like to say something about Evacuation Day and the interest of the American students in history. Clementine?
Hi everyone, I'm Clementine McCoy and I'm a junior at Grace Church School, and I'm also a civic fellow with Next Generation Politics. I'm incredibly honored to be included today and given the chance to speak to you all. I would like to especially thank Ambrose Richardson and the Lower Manhattan Historical Association, along with my history teacher, Jason McDonald, for giving me this opportunity. So Grace Church's deeply humanist approach to education and its contributions to the history of the city as a landmark is what first ignited my love of studying history. My first impression of history class was that history provided me with a way to imagine the lives of those who came before me. I think about the farewell speech given by George Washington at Fraunces Tavern in 1783. I think about the emotions the soldiers must have been feeling after a long and grueling war. Just imagine how many people have stood in the spot where I stand now. What were their challenges, their aspirations? How did people my age think about their place in the world 240 years ago? I've always loved history because it enables me to put myself in other people's shoes and see the world from a new perspective. What I most appreciate about history is its ability to transport me to different places and times and view the current world in a different light. Once I learned more about history, I realized that in addition to this more imaginative approach, it was also useful to me as a high school student to make real decisions about my adult life. For example, the fact that there were such heated debates at the signing of the Declaration of Independence reminds me that being open-minded in arguments can lead to greatness. When bickering with my co-editors at my school's literary magazine, I try to remember this and channel the patience that the Founding Fathers must have had at that time. Learning about history gives us the skills to comprehend things that may be unfamiliar to us, and I think that navigating the past is necessary in order to navigate the present. Having a solid understanding of American history and the lives of the Americans who have came before us is crucial to maintaining the democracy that our predecessors fought so hard for. By understanding the way that the world operates, one can form more educated and articulate opinions. For a functioning democracy, it is imperative that every citizen is able to understand and defend their personal worldview. History provides examples of problem solving, both good and bad, and defending one's beliefs. Once we study how one event can lead to another, we can make better decisions for the future. This makes the knowledge of history a very powerful tool. Another important thing that history does, with its myriad windows into the lives of others, is inspire compassion. I believe that compassion is a key factor when building a future for a more just and free society. By learning about the experiences of those who have been silenced throughout history, I am encouraged to listen carefully to every voice. As I consider my future as a college-level historian, I look for ways to discover not only historical facts, but also the effects that those facts have had on real human lives. Thank you.
Without prior warning, I want to call on Peter Hine, who's the president of the Sons of the Revolution of the state of New York, who own and maintain Fraunces Tavern.
Thank you, Ambrose. Sons of the Revolution seeks to commemorate those who fought for American independence, as well as the key events of the revolution that led to American independence. Last Monday, we commemorated Evacuation Day with our annual Evacuation Day dinner, replicating the 13 toasts that were given that night 240 years ago today. And today, under the leadership of the Lower Manhattan Historical Association, Ambrose Richardson, Jim Kaplan, the founder, and the rest of the organization, we commemorate the actual event 240 years ago today with the lowering of the British flag and the raising of the American flag. Thank you.
I have to give a couple of advertisements here. First of all, Fraunces Tavern and Fraunces Tavern Museum is a living monument. This isn't some old guy's house. This is where history actually took place. It was the key place, it was the place to go in New York in the 18th century from about 1760 to 1780 and even later. It was the site of the first executive office building. If there was an important meeting intended to happen there, and as I said, it's serving the same function today as it did then. It's a public gathering place. It's a great restaurant, and it's a fantastic museum. I also want to give a pitch, going to have to give a pitch for the Museum of the American Indian, which is behind you. This is on the site of the former Fort George, which was there almost exactly the same place at the time. There has always been a permanent exhibit called An Infinity of Nations, which describes the incredible history of indigenous Americans, American Indians. And there's a new exhibit that's been up about a year of the New York Indians, which there are many tribes, and they played a crucial role on both sides of the American Revolution. They tell part of the story there. It's part of the Smithsonian. It's free, so if you get a chance, take a look at it. We have a new group today, or not entirely new, but this is the Hercules Mulligan Society has come out in force. You know, and maybe if you've seen the musical Hamilton, you have some familiarity with Hercules Mulligan. Hercules Mulligan, well, I'll let them tell a little bit about it, but I can say an Evacuation Day, after the ceremony at the end, the feast at the end of Evacuation Day, the first thing Washington did was meet with Hercules Mulligan, who was his source of information on a couple of occasions, saving his life. We have a representative of the this gentleman here, aren't you, the head honcho here? Just a couple of words here, okay.
I'm not prepared for this. This was a different no, I won't get into this, but yeah, the Hercules Mulligan Society we put together, we just want to remember important dates and people and events that were very important to American history. That's our namesake. It's not stand for, it's our namesake, just like Evacuation Day is like our flagship day. So we'll be here as long as you have this. And Evacuation Day, a lot of people here never even heard of Evacuation Day. It was only celebrated for about 100 years. And then Abraham Lincoln put in Thanksgiving on this weekend, and the 4th of July became the bigger American holiday. But before that, for 100 years, Evacuation Day was the #1 holiday in this land after the British evacuated. And so that's what we stand for, just trying to remember important dates, important people, and events that that were important to the history. And our mission statement is to promote and preserve traditions and philosophies of the Founding Fathers, the U.S. Constitution, and forgotten extraordinary events, dates, and people paramount to our American history. That's what we stand for. So, thank you. Okay. And there is a movement afoot, promoted particularly by the Bowling Green Association, to name the bridge over the West Side Highway for Hercules Mulligan and Cato, who was his associate, servant, whatever designation, but Cato was the guy who delivered the messages, was captured by the British, tortured, and they gave nothing up, was loyal until the end of the year. Both great men and growth heroes of the Revolution. Now I'd like to turn this over to the guys who are really in charge, Veteran Corps of Artillery. Who we have here for this? Colonel Meckman.
Good afternoon, all. Very quickly, I will hope that you will all think of Evacuation Day as a day of healing. It didn't start that way for sure. Our adversaries treated us poorly by nailing the Union Jack to the post that day. And I'm sure at the end we wanted to give them a parting shot on the way out of New York Bay. But it began a process with some family fights, a long process, a process throughout the 19th century. But at the end, where we wound up, fast friends, partners in peace and partners in prosperity with the British nation. And so think about that, about Evacuation Day, and I thank you all for coming today.
Okay, I'll call John Conlon of Gold Dragoons. Captain Conlon.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll be brief because there's a sailing ship in the harbor that's going to take me back to merry old England. And it's November, so the weather's atrocious. But I'll try to be cheerful. We've got to explain that I'm a former British Army officer and I am Troop Commander of Gold Dragoons, the gentleman in the red coats here. It was an organization which was chartered by King Charles II in 1662. And we continue the traditions. We raise money for veterans, but basically we also have a good time. From the historian standpoint, we look back in awe in 1775 when the farmers of Massachusetts took on the British Army. The British Army was the finest army in the world at that time, and the first early battles the British always won. But bit by bit, the Americans got better and better and better, until finally we threw in the towel and sailed away to England. It could have gone the other way, of course, in which case you'd all be talking like me. Thanks for coming.
So I think we want to get on with, I think one of the next item of business is to get that flag down and put another one up. We got a more appropriate flag.
Captain Conlon, please return this to His Majesty. The compliments of his former subjects.
Oops. Huzzah!
Okay, so this was the first occasion in our history when the American flag flew over a completely independent country, no longer occupied, as New York was for 7 years, by British troops. As Pauline had told us, although they got on their ships, they didn't actually leave until December 4th when the wind was right. And Washington stayed around until December 4th, which was the day on which he said farewell to his officers at Fraunces Tavern. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your service. This concludes our ceremony. Thank you all for coming. Please remember this day, today, and in the future as one of the most significant events in New York and American history. Thank you all.
This is Tour Guide Stan. I hope you've enjoyed this video. We do it every year on this day. We also have a nice Flag Day parade. Anyway, you can hire me for history tours of downtown, way uptown, battle sites, all here in Manhattan Island. Have a good time and come to New York. This is Isle of New York Tours.